You heard it here first. I believe Jordan Peterson will have his license to practice clinical psychology in Ontario revoked.
Butchers and liars. Reprise.
So if you're not aware, Jordan Peterson tweeted yesterday, breaking, the Ontario College of Psychologists have demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts for among these crimes, and he suspected it was a political reason. If you go to today, he posted this page from his complaint, which says that the Inquiries, Complaints, and Reports Committee of the College of Psychologists of Ontario have had concern about his appearance on a January 25th, 2022 podcast. Now that is this podcast with Jordan Peterson, 1769. That happened January 25th, 2022. Now I haven't seen the podcast. I don't know what was said on that podcast. I've seen a bunch of clips from it. There's really nothing that struck me as unprofessional in that podcast, but nevertheless, that is, according to the College of Psychologists of Ontario, the nature of his complaint. Jordan Peterson has indicated he's going to fight this, and I do think that in a lot of ways this is going to bring more attention to Jordan Peterson. Here I am actually making a video about that, so I am like playing into this very thing, and I think he'll take advantage of this and fight it to the end. But I also think the College of Psychologists of Ontario are not going to back down, and I think they're going to successfully revoke his license. I believe that there is a bunch of pressure on the college to do something, quote unquote, about Jordan Peterson. I think that when Jordan Peterson's Twitter account was suspended and canceled before Elon Musk bought Twitter, they were probably fine with that. They said, okay, Twitter is policing themselves. We don't need to worry about it. But now that he's back on Twitter and his political opinions are being expressed far and wide, I think the college is saying now we have to do something. We can't just sit back. So what is this video about really? Well, my concern here is really not about Jordan Peterson's political views. I disagree with a lot of what he says, not everything. He says some good things too, for sure. And if you pay attention to him, there are some honestly good common sense things, but there are those other areas. And I think a lot of what he says on the issue of transgender rights, for example, is problematic. He makes something that is really gray and complex into a black and white issue. And I think that is probably one of the worst things that you could do. We need more nuance in our conversations these days. And Jordan Peterson disguises his opinion as a nuanced opinion, but expresses it as a black and white opinion, which is actually really where my concern lies with him as a figure. But that is no reason to have someone's psychological license suspended. So that's really what this video is about, is the issue of these neutral organizations. That organization is not supposed to be political, putting political pressure on figures in our society and community. That is the nature of the concern. I do want to back off for a second here and just give you a little bit of a background. Before Jordan Peterson became famous for writing 12 Rules of Life, for his appearances on Joe Rogan, he was a very prominent and controversial figure in Canada, where he came out against this idea of compelled speech. It's actually something that he more or less coined, or at least popularized the term of compelled speech. And this was once again related to the issue of people who are in the transgender community asking members of the community at large to use their preferred pronouns. And he fought that vigorously.
Because that part people with this opinion to settle the opinion in a civil society.
Kindness is the excuse that social justice warriors use when they want to exercise control over what other people think and say. The point is the specifics of the legislation that surrounds it and the insistence that people will have to use compelled speech. That's what I'm objecting to.
And people really did latch on to Jordan Peterson's point of view because it felt like individual rights were being restricted. And I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable when governments will put pressure on you to restrict your individual rights. There is a group of people in all of our communities that feel very strongly that they want to have freedom, and Jordan Peterson tapped into that. I think a lot of times, though, he exaggerated the concerns and the issue really to become more prominent. It was that exaggeration that brought him to fame. And so I have obviously concerns about him as a figure. But having concerns of somebody as a figure is a good thing. We need to be concerned about the people who are in the public eye and challenge them. Having strong, vigorous conversations about various issues is such an important part of just being a healthy community. We need those outlets. And pressuring people or pushing people off of platforms because you don't like their views is a serious concern. And we're seeing more and more evidence that that's happening in our society. So let's take a quick look at the policies that the College of Psychologists of Ontario. So a couple things. Their general policy here, I think, is relatively important for this conversation. So a couple things. They recommend or require that the psychologist maintain the dignity of the profession, be respectful of human rights and diversity, advocate for mental health, and be respectful of other professions. So this is actually one of the areas that I'm most critical of with Jordan Peterson, is this issue of respectful of other professions. So in earlier 2022, I was going to make a video responding to one of Jordan Peterson's criticisms. He was calling surgeons that perform gender affirmative surgery as butchers. And he's gone off on these surgeons for, months and years, really. And I do think he's falling out of line with some of these policies here. I think he's borderline being disrespectful of other professions. Absolutely, you can criticize those decisions and ask tough questions. Should someone who's 12 years old undergo gender affirming surgery? That is a fair question. It's a gray area, right? And so I think Jordan Peterson's concerns should be heard, but calling those that choose to go down that path butchers and using other inflammatory language is where Jordan Peterson is getting in a bit of trouble. And I actually think that this is the area that the college is going to ultimately, like I said at the beginning of the video, use to ultimately revoke his license. They'll say you were publicly disparaging, using this kind of inflammatory language to marginalize and hurt a group of people. And it's that extreme language that I know has brought you a lot of attention, Jordan Peterson, but that extreme language is also lending you some trouble. So there's criticism really on Jordan Peterson's side here that I think is fair, but also on the college's side. I'm going to go very quickly to the organization that I fall under, because I think that's important, and I submit myself to this organization. They talk about a few things. Again, right at the beginning, professionalism is a part of the doctor's code when it comes to social media policy. We must uphold the standards of the medical profession and control ourselves in a professional manner. Do not engage in disruptive behavior. Now, what does that mean? That could be anything, right? If you're controversial at all, that would be considered disruptive potentially. But I do know colleagues of mine who've gotten themselves in a little trouble on Twitter. And I just want to comment really quickly on Twitter. Twitter is completely different than YouTube or other environments. YouTube is safe, relatively, because I'm going to watch this video and it's only going to go online if it turns out that it's half decent, right? There's so much more that goes into making a YouTube video that I've got to be careful and think about what I'm saying, edit it if there's a concern. But when you're doing Twitter, it's off the cuff. You make two things, there's barely any editing, and the bottom line is that Twitter is honestly a flow of consciousness. You see doctors get themselves in trouble all the time. They just share something, they tweet it, and all of a sudden it's out in the internet forever. So I do think that one solution, if you're a Jordan Peterson type person, is, get off of things like Twitter. I know the reach is high, but get out there and use things that force you to review what you're saying. Go in front of the camera. That will very clearly crystallize your thinking. If you've got to sit in front of a camera, share what you're feeling to the world and watch it back, completely different threshold. And so again, some of the challenges with social media sometimes is how quickly you can just, throw ideas out there. They do give us some room for us to be controversial here. He says, advocating for patients and improve health system can result in some conflict, okay? But you need to be professional when you're doing that. And I think that's fair. Now, where the CPSO sometimes can use this policy as a stick is this issue of disseminating information. We just came out of a pandemic. There were lots of times where there was controversy about certain treatments, certain policies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I do think that the silencing of certain views in the long run hurt our profession more than help. Now, there are lots of harmful views that were being promoted, and people had a lot of different opinions. And I think if we think about it from the 2023 perspective as opposed to the 2020 perspective, and I just want to share with you, there were a lot of people whose livelihoods were very seriously hurt, and people who really suffered during the pandemic. They suffered with the goal of helping reduce the amount of disease and death, and it was difficult for a lot of people to see a way out, to see how their sacrifice was actually making a difference in our community. And these people were looking for solutions to the pandemic that maybe weren't necessarily the most scientifically based. And the problem here is that there was really very few opportunities for people to express a dissenting opinion during that time. And unfortunately, the profession, my profession in particular, doubled down on their positions, and I think in the end lost some respect in our community because of the fact that they were silencing debate. People wanted their voice heard, even if it wasn't as informed maybe as other voices possibly, but felt silenced. And so I think in the long run, any policy on social media that hampers debate is actually going to hurt the professions more in the long run. So I'm going to end this video here. I do believe that Jordan Peterson is going to be found in violation of these broad sweeping social media policies. I do believe that he will lose his license to practice clinical psychology. And I think actually in the end, that's harmful for the professions as a whole. I think the idea that the professions are limiting debate, putting their finger on the debate, challenging the opportunity for debate is actually harmful for our professions in the long run. And I want to do my very best to discourage that from happening in the future. My name is Dr. Hillsden. This is my channel, Knife Skills. A little different video than I normally make. Thank you for watching and have a great day.